Hey guys, my name is Priscilla De La Cruz. I'm over at University of New Mexico. I'm an assistant professor. I'm a lung brain access researcher. Super excited about ATS and meeting everybody. And so today is really just very informal. It's office hours. It's our way of answering questions, helping you prepare for the conference. If you want us to give you feedback on the poster, your elevator pitch, picking sessions, etc. That's kind of what it's about. And so I'm going to go around and let everybody introduce themselves, and people may join in late. Okay, so I'm going to popcorn over to Nick Ingram because he's the next person on my screen there. So, Nick, tell us about yourself.
Hi, Nick Ingraham. I'm at the University of Minnesota. I'm a physician scientist. I do mainly research on provider variation, delivering evidence-based care in the ICU. And I will popcorn it over to Dr. Katira.
Hey, Nick, you can call me Bhushan. Hi there. My name is Bhushan Katira. I'm at WashU in St. Louis. I'm a pediatric critical care physician, but I research in ARDS using large animal models. So my research encompasses pediatric adult ARDS, the mostly ventilator-induced lung injury and its applications using electrical impedance tomography, etc.
When you say large animals, what kind of large animals are they?
Pigs, about 40, 50 kilogram pigs.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the same ventilator we use at the bedside. It's the same machine on EIT. It's the same, very much same technology which you see at the bedside is applied on the animal while we study them. That's a fascinating part.
That is very fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, we should talk. I have some questions about that later.
Yes.
But let's see. So Samira, you're saying you're on your way home, can't unmute. You're from Jacoby. Oh, okay, great. And then let's see. How about Ashmita Reddy? Are you able to join us?
Hi, sorry, I can't turn on my video, but I'm Asmita. I'm a PGY2 from SIU Internal Medicine in Springfield, Illinois. Nice to meet you all.
Hey, nice to meet you too. So you're going to ATS this year?
Yes,
And is it your first time going to ATS?
yes, my first time going to ATS. Yep. I have an abstract I got accepted, so yeah.
Congratulations.
That's
That's super exciting. Have you been to any conferences before? Or will ATS be your first one?
Oh no, I've been to CHEST last year, and then I just recently went to ACP, but this is my first ATS.
Okay. I love chest, but I feel like ATS has a lot more sessions. And so one of the things that I noticed when I went to ATS for the first time was that it was kind of overwhelming to kind of pick out where to be and how to be in all these places at once. Have you looked at the schedule at all to kind of think about some of the sessions, or do you have any particular clinical interests?
Right now, no particular interest. I've been looking at some of the pulmonology sessions, and you're right. There's a lot of options that, and like some of the ones that I do want to attend do clash in the same hour. So, still have to decide. I guess I'm just gonna see how the day goes.
Yeah, and so then to popcorn over to Bhushan, how did you kind of figure out which sessions to go to when you had so many different options?
Yeah, it's really hard. And ATS is overwhelming. I agree with you, Priscilla. I call it as a conference of conferences. There are too many sessions that parallel run. There are too many things that happen. So there are a couple of ways, when I went to ATS, my interest was more about what sort of science and abstracts is being presented. So previously they would publish an pre-abstract book with just the headings and stuff. So I would pick out what sessions of those abstracts are more inviting, so that, this, of course, Asmita, you will see that when you present your poster, it will be clubbed around the similar themes. You can go visit posters from other investigators, other students and fellows. And that helped me. So figuring out what those are, I would see through them and then tick mark for, given my learning load, which is not huge, I cannot take too much. I said, if I pick up three sessions per day, which are best, I've gained a lot from a particular conference. More than three becomes, then there's too much of information overload and stuff. And then I did select some speakers whom I liked. Back then, Dr. Martin Tobin was a regular visitor, and I absolutely love listening to that man, whatever he talks. So I would suggest, Asmita, figure out what your interest lies and what sort of people you want to listen to and who are coming. I do believe more than the clubbing sessions, the people who are talking in that session attracts me. Of course, we don't know everybody, and so it'll be good to see through some of those names. And then the last thing, of course, is to see what sort of themes, like as you are more interested in pulmonology, my choices were mostly critical care and mostly ARDS or physiology aspects of critical care. There are, of course, things like AI, there is epidemiology, then there is, even molecular biology presentations and stuff. So those sort of things get clubbed, and you can choose, you should decide what, I would think not more than 3 important sessions a day. Rest, whatever comes passively is fine, but that's sort of my rule even for clinical medicine. Don't do more than 3 things in a day for a patient, or, in a presentation, don't bring up more than 3 important aspects, that kind of, but I just go by that rule of 3.
I think that's a pretty good approach. And then Nick, what's your approach? And have you had any luck in like networking after any of these sessions or approaching the speakers? What's that like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think about kind of my path of how it's evolved and how I've actually set up preparing for ATS essentially, or planning for my ATS days. I think back to when I was in residency, just more so thinking about it from the clinical perspective. And I think, Bhushan gave great advice on the fact of like, find your theme, find your niche, like that's really what you enjoy and you get excited about. The nice way to do that is to look at ATS through the lens of the assemblies, is like the very simplest starting mechanism. If you're going to look at it from a clinical perspective to find out where you're going to plan to go and what to do. And so, if it happens to be thoracic oncology or it happens to be critical care, what's really nice is that every single assembly sponsors certain sessions. So again, if you go into this without knowing absolutely anything, you can at least do your clinical interest. You filter by the sessions in the app that say, this is what the critical care assembly, their planning and programming committee, they decided was important enough to make these big sessions, right? And so that at least is the simplest way to go about it from a clinical perspective. It evolves over time, and this gets to Priscilla's question, is a little bit networking becomes a little bit more of a thing, and then also depending on where your career takes you, research, right? And in particular, fellowship, right? Like you start to do more in fellowship and you kind of have your own thing. It's not like you're doing an ad hoc research project that you may be doing in residency or what have you, which you may or may not have as much, invested interest in, depending on what you're doing. But that becomes more of a thing. And then you can then tailor your planning to what in the past have you seen? And like every single iteration of ATS gets better and better because you start to meet people at these sessions that you're interested in and that go along with research that you're involved in. But again, even just starting out with the clinical perspective is great because that's where you're going to start to run into people and see people multiple times over. And especially if you start to do what are called like the poster discussion sessions, that's a little bit more intimate. That's where really they're putting together abstracts that all have a theme. And again, you can find kind of these clinical themes that interest you. And then that's going to be a lot of the national, if not world experts kind of in that room talking about that topic. And then that's probably one of the best ways that you'll start to network because you can ask questions and you start to see people, year after year and even day after day, you'll start to see some of the same people because they're going to have the same interests. So that's probably the main way that I started networking. I'll be honest, I didn't appreciate it until you get multiple ATSs under your belt. But that's also something I wish I would have known earlier on because I probably would have put more time and effort into that because I didn't appreciate until you really do start talking to people and looking at posters and talking to the people who made them. Because again, they're proud of it. You can ask even the simplest of questions. Like they want to talk about it, and it gets them excited. And then you're going to see them the next year after that. And, it really, really becomes awesome. It's something that I didn't take advantage of until later on at ATS. So enjoy it, be excited about it, be curious. And as long as you show up to any session and you're curious, like you will be successful at ATS no matter what, 100%.
I totally agree. And I actually have a fun story about those poster sessions. So because I'm very interested in this lung brain axis and understanding like neurodegeneration and neuroinflammation and critical illness and chronic lung disease, it's a very niche kind of area of research. And so I was in one of these poster sessions and I saw a poster where someone had looked at like spinal cord neuroinflammation and pulmonary hypertension in patients. And I was looking at like neuroinflammation in rodent models and pulmonary hypertension. And I went up to that person and I started talking to them and they said, why don't we collaborate? Show me your IHC stains. And so we're actually co-authoring a paper together because they had samples that I didn't have and I had staining protocols and an idea that they hadn't considered. And now we get to write a paper together and it all came from meeting at ATS at those poster sessions and just kind of being brave and introducing myself and asking questions. And it was really nice. Like I was like a T32 postdoc fellow, and this was like an R1 funded investigator, but they were completely approachable because they were just interested in the science. And I think that's what's special about ATS. There's a real community of people who are just kind of committed to the mission.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
have you guys ever approached anyone that you were like, Bhushan, you mentioned Dr. Tobin. Have you ever approached him?
Yeah.
Approached anyone at ATS?
In fact, I have another fun story about ATS, So as Nick mentioned about poster discussion sessions, and like there are, Asmita, you probably know there are three kinds of posters, rapid, thematic, and poster discussion sessions. And this was in San Diego back then, and I was walking down the thematic posters, and I saw a very old gentleman sitting on his chair and presenting with long cane and getting through the poster. I'm like, I think I've seen this guy on YouTube. I know this man, and it turns out it was Dr. West. He's in his 90s and presenting a poster that he has discovered recently. I'm like, maybe I chose the wrong field. I don't want to go this far. But, he very kindly allowed me to take a picture with him. And then he went through the poster. And my mentor, Dr. Kavanagh, Brian Kavanagh, would say that, and I did not know this, I would meet John West, but he said, if you want to ever present your poster, it should be like John West. And here it is. I'm seeing John West present his poster. And this round of three, that my idea of three comes from there. He just made three graphs, and there are three important graphs of those results. And it was, as we have end-tidal CO2, he had end-tidal oximetry on how you measure exhaled oxygen. And that tells you, like, wow, this is a phenomenal thing. But he had minimum things written on his poster, very clear presentation, I got an idea of what to do with posters, you see, and that was fabulous. And similarly with Dr. Tobin, Dr. Tobin now gives more of philosophy talks than physiology talks. But he gave a talk once on what is clinical medicine and how intuition helps in clinical medicine. And there were many takes on how it developed. And I said, this is phenomenal, but I don't know how to do it for myself. I better go and ask him. And then I really approached him and spoke with him, etc. He was very kind. Initially, I was really fearful that he's a very robust guy, very strong. He speaks with such clarity. He should be approachable, but he's a phenomenal gentleman, always eager to mentor, always eager to discuss and talk. And, he has this Irish cold cut humor, and that's a little difficult to handle. But I think, he taught me many things. He sent me some good articles, and I have not been in touch with him, but I've met him a couple of times thereafter.
Oh, wow. So this actually became something where you kept in touch after the meeting.
Yeah. So I'm from Canada. He would also visit Canada, Critical Care Canada conference. And this was more because he was very close to my mentor, Brian. So he would visit us very often, and that's how we started speaking more often. It is funny the way I was introduced to him also. So Brian brought somebody in and he introduced that guy saying that, this guy, he thinks it is not worth listening to Martin Tobin. I'm like, I never said this. And then that person explained to me why Martin Tobin is important. He brought me to Martin Tobin, etc. It was funny. There's a lot of funny stories. But the short of long is that, if I think you should go with many colleagues, meet with people, and, your mentors can introduce you to several people there. And I agree with Nick. I think look at the thematic posters, think about what interests you, Go and be free, discuss. Initially, like I come from India, where there's a lot of hierarchical attitude in medicine. Approachability to very senior and super senior people is sometimes restrictive, and you fear talking to them. But this is absolutely different here in North America. This is extraordinary that even the most accomplished person wants to talk with the most junior and budding people who have questions, who have, want to interact. And they find extraordinary, mostly, I'm not sure about everybody, but mostly I felt that they felt, fulfillment in speaking with people who have genuine questions and genuine interest in science and want to grow. And ATS is an extraordinary platform for that. And similarly, like Priscilla, I have met a couple of people with whom now I'm able to collaborate and work, mostly through the thematic poster sessions. And not this year, maybe next year, we'll probably put in a session for electrical impedance tomography or something of that sort. So there are more people with whom you interact and you can actually participate in developing themes in ATS too. But as Nick said, that for that you need more ATS under your belt, and you go recurrently the same conference, meet similar people, and develop a particular niche area again and again, going through that, and that really enriches you.
And so I think this is a good question for Nick. Let me ask you a question. When you guys are and maybe Bhushan as well, when you are approaching people, what is your sort of pitch? Like, how are you pitching yourself? How are you going up to people after they speak or at their poster session? Like, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, it's probably not a good question for Nick because I am the least confrontational person in the world. And my funny story about doing this is that I was actually at SECM, and it was an 8-hour grant writing session, and Jack Awashnan had given a really great talk about mentorship and stuff like that. And and he even said if you need to, just go up to somebody and ask them to chat for 30 minutes. Don't be afraid. And again, he did the exact same research that I did. I'd read all of his papers, and then he happened to be there giving a talk. And again, it never in my life would I ever imagine walking up to somebody, even though I tell people to do this, it just gives me the chills to even think about it. But I did muster up the courage to do it that one time. And he was as bright as he was leaving and about to go back to the hotel, and then he actually said no.
Oh man, really? He said no.
He felt awful, but he said, and his closing thing was the worst that they can do is say no, right? So he's like, no, make sure you ask it. So then I did it to him after the session, and he was like, no, I'm really sorry, I can't. I kind of need this one break, and then my flight's leaving. And so I was so embarrassed. Oh, he followed up with an email, and him and I've gotten to know each other, and we text all the time now. So it's all fine, but I still tell that story, and I still give him a bunch of crap about it because it's it took me an hour to muster up the courage to ask him that. And he's like, no, I'm sorry, I can't. But he made up for it totally. And it's if it tells you anything, that's the worst that could happen, and it wasn't that bad. I was just oh, okay. And he was totally right. He was like, oh yeah, that wasn't bad. It wouldn't, and he said it in the kindest of ways, of course. But, it finally got me over that hump where now I feel fine coming up to people and asking, because I'm just well, it can't be that bad. Where it's my one research idols turned me down right away. And I'm yeah, can't be worse than that. So no, just know that it does not, morally hurt or anything like that. It's just oh, okay, that's fine. We can't. And then you're back to the exact same position that you were 10 minutes before that, right? But exactly what Jack did. He still emailed me. We still followed up, and then through multiple other avenues, we came back to each other. Now we're working on projects together and stuff. And so it's just funny because no matter what if you do stuff that's similar to somebody, you will inevitably interact with them in multiple different ways through ATS. And again, whether it's through admin stuff, whether it's through research, whether it's through clinical opportunities, whether it's through advocacy, there's so many different ways that when you find kind of that group or that clinical or that research kind of realm that you're in, you will eventually be with them in multiple ways that you never really would have imagined, which is awesome. And I think that's one of the beauties about it. And it's what gets me excited to not be afraid anymore, to be able to go up to somebody and just oh, hi, Terry Huff, my name's Nick Ingraham, right? Now she's the president or president of our assembly, right? And she is the kindest human being you will ever meet in the world. But because of my Jack encounter, I was like brave and went up to her, and I didn't even think twice about it. But the way that was a really long way to go about when you go up to somebody, you just introduce yourself. And if it's at a poster, I always just say, if I have a specific question about it, I start with that. And because it's always really helpful if you've like looked at it and it just puts you like way above everybody else when you've already digested some of their information because you've already committed to what they've put a ton of time into, right? And that just makes them feel special because again, they're human. But even if not, like that's fine. And just say, I'm really interested in your work. Can you tell me about it? That is my phrase every single time, after I introduce myself, and then I go from there. Because once you learn about their work or what have you, then they want to tell you about it. And then that's how you start the conversation. If it's in an venue where they're also like a spectator, so they don't have work to present, if you know that person, you go up to them and just say that you really appreciate their work on this and this. I'm interested in this. And to be honest, I'll a lot of times say thank you for contributing to that. I really enjoy reading your papers, and then just leave it at that and let them steer the conversation because then it gives them an out, right? Because they may be super busy mentoring and they have to go see some other posters. I've made the mistake that they were moderating the session and I didn't know that before. And so clearly they were actually trying to move along, but that gave them the out. They're like, oh, very nice to meet you. Hopefully we run into each other later. Conversation's over. I got to meet them. They know my face. And then sure enough, ended up meeting them again later. And that was Liz Wilcox, right? So it's like there's multiple different ways that this all just kind of happens randomly, but don't put as much thought into it and overthink it like I do, is what I've figured out. Just the more and more I've done it, the more I just always kind of laugh at myself because I used to overthink these like situations more than I should have. So
I think it's a really good point. It's kind of like don't fear the failure. The worst that can happen is that they say no.
yeah.
But Sean, you've met some really interesting, like heavy hitters at ATS. I'm really impressed. Like, what was your sort of approach to this?
I second what Nick said. It's for sure if you will be fearful in the beginning. It's really hard to when you see people and you accomplished a lot, they speak so clearly, and you're beginning. Fear is natural, and so don't feel that if I'm feeling more fearful and Nick and Bhushan are talking all very good things. No, it's good to feel fearful. That just puts you in a very clear place of what you want to ask and what you want to. So it's best to go through a little bit of. I generally go through what words I want to choose, etc. I don't want to sound fearful. I also don't want to sound over the board and just keep talking to myself. As Nick said, give 2 or 3 lines and then hold. Don't get into this praising thing. Oh my God, your work is so much, and that. Give 1 or 2 lines, say a particular niche paper, etc., what you like, and hold, and then let them direct the conversation, because they are very good at seeing your worth, and I'm sure you're very worthy. And they bring up more questions. It's much easier for you to answer. Oh, where are you from? What is your interest? You become very relaxed. Okay, this person is interested and wants to know more about me, and it's a good place to start. And then you keep, that brings the conversation ahead. But for sure, it is you who have to approach. There's no question. Nobody else is going to come and pick you up and say, hey, what are you doing, etc., kind of stuff, right? And that is a little bit of a first tip, right? But as Nick said, keep in your mind that you have a good 15, 20 minutes, if not half an hour in your hand when you're approaching somebody. It can't be like shake hand, hello, can we talk? And then you have something else, some other commitment to run to. So find out that 15, 20-minute spot, find out where they are a little relaxed, they're not surrounded by too many people, and go and simply introduce yourself. And don't be worried about a no. That's like, as Nick had heard, no, I've heard many no's and stuff, and that's fine. And, don't take it personal. Like nobody's thinking that it's not an evaluation of how pointless you are. That's not what it is. It's just about whether it was the right time, whether it was possible, feasible, etc. That's all about what it is. And so go and meet. And I think I also re-stress what Nick said, that if somebody's presenting and you're deeply interested in work, and if you're curious and you have a good question, do not fear to ask a question. Oftentimes in the beginning, you think that my question is really pointless. Like these people are already ahead, and what am I asking? And I'm going to look stupid, etc. Don't worry about it. This is your place to look stupid. 10 years from now, it will not be very good to look stupid. So it's good to look stupid if you're, and believe me, no question truly is stupid. There's nobody who's looking stupid. In fact, if you ask a question, that starts a very natural conversation because there is an interest and there is a point to where that question will lead to. And often those questions can be very open-minded or very open-ended, like, you can bring up, if somebody's presenting a data of outcomes and you say, in clinical practice, I observe this often, how do you think you can help me? How can you guide a junior from this data? And that just brings out a lot of mentoring desires from seniors, when you place yourself that, how will you advise me at my stage to do this? Wow, that's like a fantastic question. And those who have time and interest, they will just open up right there. So approach it that way. Be fearless and meet as many people as possible and meet them recurrently.
I love that. I love that idea of being fearless and actually like kind of seeking that mentorship, even with that question pattern. I think the only thing that I would add is sometimes what I'll do is I'll see the poster and I'll say, oh, I have some great questions. I might ask one question and then I'll say, is it okay if I email you? Can I have your email address? I just want to follow up. I have a couple more questions. And that's how I get their email address. And then I really do email them and follow up. And it's kind of nice because, like, if they are not interested, right, they'll just trash the email. But I would say 90% of the time, I actually get a response and we can talk about the science, we can work together on things. So that's also like a low stakes way of like not necessarily asking for a meeting, but kind of like asking for a very small kind of foothold into what's going on there. So Samira, hey, how are you doing? Oh no, I can't hear you. I think that audio is not connected.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, I just finished my shift, so that's why I was on my way, and it's like so much crowded, so I just didn't want to unmute, but now I'm home, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, no, I totally understand. So, we're just kind of going through this is office hours. It's very informal. It's just us talking about our experiences with ATS and how we've gotten the most out of it. And so, feel free to ask any questions at any point. Are you presenting anything at ATS?
Yes, I have two poster presentation in the thematic session, one on 19th and one in 20th.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ah, that's super exciting. What are the posters about?
So one is a case report. So I had a patient in ICU who had who was diagnosed with HIV in the past, but stopped taking her heart medication for a couple of years. But we restarted it 6 months ago when we found she was hospitalized and we found that she had a MAC infection. But she was on medication. She came back with septic picture, ended up in the ICU. And we found that there was some lymphadenopathy in the end, which was positive for Kaposi. So it's like a disseminated MAC infection and with Kaposi, disseminated Kaposi, because it was not like a typical cutaneous presentation. So it was more like an organ presentation with lymph node main involvement. So it seemed interesting to me and something that I should share with my colleagues. So that's why I submitted it.
I love it. That's a really interesting case. And then I see Morty as well. Morty, do you want to unmute and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself as well and kind of your kind of what plans for ATS?
Hi everyone, my name is Morteza, but you can call me Morty. I'm a second year nursing PhD student at the University of Pittsburgh School of Nursing, and I will present my abstract at ATS on, I suppose, 18. It's about the effect of family visitation on preventing delirium in the ICU.
Oh, very cool. Very relevant, especially in the post-COVID world. We all learned a lot about the family visitation and how that can affect the patients. That's exciting.
Yeah, thanks. And that project is related to one of my projects that I done in my own country, in Iran. Iran is a country in Middle East. And in Iran, we do not have family visitation like US. It's very restricted. I suppose we have just 30 minutes per day. family visitation, and usually we have that beyond the glass, like a glass, and you just can, shake your hand for your patient. And that's terrible. But hopefully we found that family visitation can prevent delirium in patient that admit in the ICU.
Hmm. It's a really unique perspective. I don't think I've realized what visitation would be like in Iran and how that might be different from here in the US.
Yeah, in the US we have a 24-hour open family visitation, and yeah, and that's wonderful. And we have family member in a care team as a member, as a active member. They can participate in decision making. But in Iran and also in Middle East, uh, we have a restricted, rule for family members in the ICU in critical care, and also we have a limited, family visitation time. And for my dissertation as a PhD student, right now I'm doing some project that develop that concept, the concept of family engagement in the ICU. And we have some some concept related to that, but I suppose we need more action oriented, perspective related to family engagement in the ICU, specifically in adult ICU.
Yeah, no, that's a really important and timely topic. I'm excited to kind of I want to give Ashmita an opportunity to tell us about her poster, and then I was gonna switch over to Bhushan and Nick and ask how they prepare their poster so we can help get you guys ready. Ashmita, what are you presenting at ATS?
So my posters on this, so we had a patient who, which had one of her T-spines collapsed, so she had a compressed T-spine fracture for which she ended up like being paraplegic for. So orthopedics actually intervened on her, and they tried to do a kyphoplasty, basically like a cement injection into the T-spine. And when they tried that, they inadvertently injected it into like her vasculature. So she ended up with like significant cement in her pulmonary vasculature. So it's basically a case of cement pulmonary embolism. She like clogged off her complete left main pulmonary artery from this. And we don't talk about complications from like kyphoplasty because usually we don't see this, but this is one of like the rarer complications. And so that's what I'm presenting on.
Oh, that's super interesting. I've never seen that. So it sounds like we kind of have two different types of posters within the group. We have like research and we also have case report. So I'm gonna popcorn over to Nick. Nick, what is kind of your approach to putting together these types of posters when you're trying to help the audience learn about these rare cases or about this research? Kind of how do you prepare these posters?
Yeah, I trying to remember what the was it called Better poster was kind of like the type of posters that became like a style that was used when I was in residency. And I started to kind of embrace that. And essentially, my big thing is that really kind of what Dr. Wested, as like Bhushan was talking about, is like having just kind of like the central information and the takeaways very much prominent right in the center. And so, and then everything kind of on the side is kind of the nuance and like a little bit of the filling in the data for like the nitty gritty. And the way I think about it is I think about my audience and like who can be in the front row and then who can also be kind of middle back row, right? And if somebody is going to be flying by back row, like, are they able to get the gist of my poster based on the title and like one figure? And so that's essentially where I start. So like, what is the take home? So you make sure that your title's good. Obviously, the abstract's already submitted, but you can still have a main takeaway point, which I've actually put like right in the center and then have graphs around it at times, right? If it's one statement, one sentence, like always make sure with HIV that you're thinking of blank when something is high. Like if that's your main takeaway, like have that kind of in a prominent place, like that is your take home point. And so those are the people that are in the back row. Yeah, I kind of call them like the flybys. Like they're not really going to be interested in there's the potential that they're not interested in your poster, they're going somewhere else. But that one statement or that title or that one graph is going to be the thing that makes them do like a double take and they're like, oh, yeah, actually, let me become a middle row person. So that's when they take out their phone and then they kind of scoot over a little bit closer. They don't commit yet. Now they're in the middle row. So that's where now they can see kind of the other 2 or 3 graphs, and then they can decide, do they really want to get to the nitty gritty on the sides of like what that information is? Again, you don't have to make your poster this way, but it helps to think about what do you prioritize in your poster if you think about it from the audience's perspective. So even if you do it in a traditional format or whatever, where do you need to spend your time? Spend your time on how you're going to get the back row to see it. So that's where you need to spend time. So what is that graph? What is that statement? Because again, we can sit there and try and format the references and then make sure that the introduction is beautiful. Nobody cares about that. Nobody's ever going to touch that. All of they're going to see is they're going to pay attention to you, which is the most important part, right? Besides the research, you're the one who developed it. You're the one who's communicating it. That is 90% of everything poster-wise. It's a little bit demoralizing knowing that because you spend so much time on this poster, but in truth, that is what it comes down to. And so make sure that you're at least prioritizing where the effort should go. And so if you think about it from that standpoint, those are kind of like what you call the rocks of the poster. So make it for the back row. What are those main points? And then what is it that's going to get them to move to like your middle row audience? And then that'll be kind of your making sure that the methods are kind of fleshed out a little bit, and then making sure that the results are there. And then the very front row person who really wants to know, what was the cohort from what date to what date, or what was the LDH of that patient on day 2 or something like that, But once you get them to the front row, again, you're going to be telling them most of that information. So a lot of that nuance and minutia of everything, even if you put a lot of thought into what labs you're going to put on there, like in the smaller font, somebody's going to ask you something that you didn't put on there. It's inevitable. And you're going to say, oh man, I thought of everything. No, it's just how people think. And that's okay because you've already got them to the front row seats. So you're fine. And you just talk about it. And that is the goal for all of this. And so I think about it from that standpoint. That's kind of how I go through my thought process and knowing what I prioritize to get people to come from the back row up to the front row of a poster.
That's a lot of sense. So really relying on that take home point and making that the focus of the poster. Bhushan, what about you? What are you doing with these posters? Oh, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. No, I completely echo everything that Nick said. That, think about the last benchers or people who are not going to be able to see. So make sure you paid attention to your fonts, etc. What it should not be is it should not be an illuminated textbook. There shouldn't be too much written. It shouldn't appear that there's a lot of, oftentimes in different times, if you're writing a paper about it and then making a poster, you have a lot of thought, you put in a lot of work, etc. And you have a desire of showing it all of that. But that is a mistake in my mind because this is just 5 minutes of encounter where you want to give niche this thing, right? You've spent a whole year, a lot of time, and you're probably the best person who knows your work, of course, besides your authors. And there's a lot of depth that you've achieved through that work. You don't need to communicate all of that. No, you want to give them the crux points, those 2 or 3 important graphs, which will stay with them, which will make them think what it is. And might be they will come back to you later or even email you, etc. And so make it as presentable and as simple, as clear as possible, with clear take-home messages, always in bold letters. A very catchy title is important. A title which doesn't catch somebody's eyes, which is a simple statement, might not be very attractive, even if the work is attractive. And so that's how several times abstracts get accepted, or that's how, even when you submit to high journals for for publication, you want to make sure that your title is also very catchy, right? So make sure that your title is catchy. Generally, it is, for research, it is the key hypothesis which you've shown could be very catchy up there. And the last thing is, while practice some amount of it as your presentation before with your colleagues, and so that you have some words which are clear, you're not hesitating, you're not worried to say the same thing again. I think practice, for me, it was very helpful, because I was a very fast speaker and I wanted to flush out all information in my early research days, now 10, 12 years ago. And I'm like, all right, boys, just stop. This is too much. That kind of stuff. So it goes slow and, break it down, bring a couple of points, and that was lovely, right? And that just becomes very easy. And the last thing, as a student, as somebody who's presenting work, look out for questions that you're not able to answer. Do not become defensive for that, right? Or don't say that you always have an answer for all the questions asked. Sometimes senior people will ask you questions, not because they're looking for an immediate answer, but they're wanting you to probe this question. They're wanting you to think. They're wanting you to go deeper into your work. And to me, that was the best suggestion I received early on, that don't try to always attempt an answer or feel proud that I answered all questions. If you do not come back with questions that you could not answer, that's what my mentors told me was like failed presentation. You should have gotten questions that you did not answer, because that simply means that somebody was making you think and you were ready to think with them. That's about it, right? So look out for those questions and try to keep it somewhere in your memory, and then write to them immediately, or ask a colleague, somebody who's there with you, that do write some of these questions down so that you can come back and think about them.
I love that. I think that's some really good advice. So I love the idea of like practicing, because, a lot of times in these thematic poster sessions, people are going around and they're like, okay, tell us about your poster. And if it's the first time you're talking about it, you might get kind of nervous. So it's good to kind of be able to practice getting that down in the 3 minutes that you may have. And then I think that the other thing that you mentioned was the questions. And I love that, because I think it makes so much sense to kind of think about them in terms of asking the questions to help you become a better scientist or a better clinician. They're actually giving you sort of their take on things as a really senior clinician or a researcher, and they're going to help make the project better. And then I also love the idea of like making everything visual. So as many things that can be a picture or a figure should be a picture or figure. That's a lot easier for people to understand. And keeping it from being too busy. So sometimes what I've done is I've actually used QR codes, because I wanted to put more things than I had space for on the poster. And so I'll just pop a QR code on there, and it opens up a PDF with all the words and things that I wanted to say that were way too much for the poster. And if somebody's interested, they can see all of that without being overwhelmed seeing the actual poster. And I usually come with like business cards if they want to contact me, or I put my contact info in that QR code so they can send me an email, because I'm always trying to find people that I can collaborate with who have similar interests. I love to meet people. And so I love that. Hey, Catherine, I thank you for joining us. So it sounds like you bring a notebook. Tell us a
Yeah,
little
I'm sorry, I
about-
hopped on late.
You're good.
I was one of my colleagues recommend I know Nick pretty well, so I heard that he was going to be on this, so I was like, oh, this is cool, I should join. And I'm in the assembly. I didn't know this event was going on, so but I'll be at the upcoming meeting, and I'm doing the faculty boot camp, so but yeah, no, I've done both the thematic poster session and a poster discussion session. And for the thematic poster session, I would just like put a notebook like in my pocket so I could jot things down, because you might get ideas for like your next research project. And then poster discussion sessions at that, have maybe a friend like take notes on what people ask you, because like you're not going to remember. But poster discussion sessions are actually one of my favorite sessions, like of them. But because I feel like the Discord, like the conversation's really, really rich. But yeah, I'm Katie, by the way. I'm a nurse and kind of a ICU workflow researcher, primarily use EHR data.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for joining us. What kind of research do you do?
So I'm really interested in kind of nursing workflows and kind of the uptake of evidence into practice by nurses, specifically surrounding sedation. So kind of like, how do nurses think about and educated about doing like sedation interruption? And like how do practices look in reality? And so kind of like, are we doing practices consistent with the evidence, and how do we think about it? Yeah, broadly. And I'm also really interested in how nurses are assigned to patients and how those assignments result in like certain patient outcomes, picking the right nurse for the right patient.
Oh, that's actually really complicated.
It is very complicated, but it's interesting, and you would think there's more logic to how we do it. But unfortunately, charge nurses have so many other responsibilities that assignments end up being kind of a last priority. So it's tough, but yeah.
That is tough. Well, thank you so much for telling us about that. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I think we have about 10 minutes left, and so I wanted to make sure I gave all of our participants the opportunity to ask questions. If you want to share your poster, we can take a look at it and give you any feedback. Totally open and available for you guys, and we just want to help you get the most out of ATS. So, does anyone want to show our poster or ask any questions?
I do have a question regarding like case report kind of poster, because we don't have like results. It's usually like some imaging, some labs that we would use in the figure section. But I was wondering, like, some description, like what is more preferred, like points, because like how the case progress, things like that. What is the best way to present that?
I think that's a really good question. And the way that I think about case reports is that I'm trying to help clinicians learn something about a rare presentation. And so for me, what I'll usually do is I'll have like take home teaching points, almost like if I was presenting this to like a group of residents or medical students so that they can understand like the clinical key points so that if they were to see this diagnosis, they could make this diagnosis is kind of my approach. Bhushan, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you that, I would rather bring those take-home points early in the case, that these are the few important things, and that kind of attracts people. And depending on what is the aspect of the case you want to discuss, is it a rare clinical presentation? It's an unusual complication. It's something that bring that aspect well out, whatever the aspect of, because cases can be very complicated. There are many, many aspects of a case, right? Sometimes. And if there is a linear progression of a case and you want to highlight that as a scalar of time, bring those aspects as a graph, that here is an admission, so many days later this happened. What was unusual is that a couple of days later suddenly we noticed this change, etc. If you have a table of clinical investigations, let's not put all things in it, but the key ones which are important, and try to highlight in red or different color the ones which are most striking. And I agree with what Priscilla said, that try to teach as if you're teaching an undergrad student. So progress the case very simply, go through it as if you're teaching somebody who's way, way junior, right? So that's sort of a flow.
Mm-hmm. I think that's perfect. And then Morty, I think I saw you on mute.
Yeah, actually, I wanna show you all my poster, but I can't share that in the chat box. So
Oh,
I can use a I can share my screen with you all.
perfect. Yeah, I wanted to make sure. Ooh, very interesting. So do you want to practice giving us your like overview of what you did here? Or not, or we can look at this. It's up to you.
Yeah, I just need, some advice for, designing of my poster. I actually add some, bar chart to show everyone that, yeah, this is the delirium incidence after family visitation and nursing. This is a nursing intervention, and this is a family visitation, actually, delirium percentage and incidence after our intervention, and this is a usual care. You know, we had three groups: usual care, nursing intervention, and actually family visitation. And here it is. I actually provided some. Sorry, here it is. 3-arm, single-blind, randomized control trial.
I love the colors.
Yeah.
I love the QR codes. That's really cool, and the acknowledgement and all of that. I'm kind of thinking about the kind of study design, and maybe we could kind of make that more of a figure where we understand what goes on in each of the arms. And that might make it so that when somebody comes in, they're saying, oh, there are 3 arms. This is what is happening in the 3 arms. It might make it a little bit easier for people to kind of follow more of a figure kind of approach there. And I saw Bhushan kind of looking at this pretty closely. What do you think?
Oh, sorry, you're mute. Dr. Katira, okay, sorry.
I don't know why I keep muting myself.
Thanks.
I agree with Priscilla. I think the methods, because this is pictorial, it'll be best to put it as some sort of a progression of graph, or this is control arm, this is intervention arm, 1, 2, 3 interventions. It just goes in easily, right?
Okay.
While talking, you can tell them exactly what you do, but it's very difficult for a person to read through every detail on a poster. It's much easier to pick up as a picture. And then the table in which results, I'm not like it's this really small print, and it's not very clear, and I don't know what the central message of that table is.
This is the actually demographic and some disease-based characteristic of actually the patient and in the 3 groups. Yeah, I can actually show you for example.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it's 100%, if it looks better, then it's fine. Then that's how it will look there too. Just see through in a bigger screen that people can read it. That's about it. Yeah. I think with 100%, it was looking okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
And then Katie, it might be interesting to get your perspective since you do some nursing research, and I think Morty is actually, was telling us he's a nursing PhD. So it'd be cool to kind of see what you think.
I'm going to push back a little bit. There's no nursing research. There's just research. We just do it with teams that include nurses.
Oh,
so
I love that.
Say that.
I love that.
But anyways, and we should have research teams that are representative of the clinical setting. But I love Jen Seaman and Sheila Alexander. I did my postdoc at Pitt, so huge fan. I mean, so listen, I'm really obsessive. So looking at this, I'm like, okay, the columns are not all the same size. So that is one thing that I did immediately notice, just being honest. I love that you included pictures. I think that's awesome. I think people don't usually do that. And I think that's nice because it situates us in the clinical space. I do worry that this results table is taking up a lot of space that you could use maybe for a figure of some kind. So I'm wondering if in like a sentence or two, you could just say the main what is interesting about that table? Like, what is it like that there's certain like breakdown by sex or gender or marital status that's interesting? Like, what were the findings that were interesting from it that like you're wanting to showcase? Those are just some like immediate ideas. I sometimes, my mentor like made me think this way a little bit, like, but like you can use figures for not just things like in the study, like you can use it to show what your study like design looked like. Like you could show it to show what your analysis looked like. For example, like I did a survival analysis, and when I like presented it at a conference, I did like a flow chart basically showing like how the variables changed from shift to shift and like what stayed the same, because it just helped people understand like what did the data look like. Even just like a figure to show your methods, you could even do potentially. So just some immediate spitballing ideas. Obviously, I don't know your project, but I mean, this is like an awesome start. You said you're a PhD student?
Yeah.
this is a much better poster than I did as a PhD student. So you were off to a really awesome start.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for your feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, and like you're welcome. Here, I'll just put my email in the chat. You're welcome to email me.
Thanks.
And I'm happy to be like of help.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I love it. This is what this is all about, seeing what we can do to help folks and broaden their network. And it's so fun that you actually have a connection to this institution. What else, guys? What other questions do we have? Okay. I think this was actually a really enjoyable session for me. I really enjoyed this kind of informal format where we got to talk to everybody who was there. It was small enough for that to be possible and kind of share some experiences and hear about you and sort of the different things. And so I'm hoping that I get to see you at ATS. That would be a lot of fun. And then Katie, Bhushan, Nick, any other final thoughts?
Oh, great session. And it was really very nice to interact with all of you. I look forward to seeing everyone.
Yeah, please come up and introduce yourself, say hi. I'll probably be sweating because I'm always sweating at those things. So come say hi.
If you're in the thematic session on 19th and 20th, I would really love to meet you in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we would love that. This has been so much fun. And we'll just kind of feel free to send any of us emails if you have any other questions or anything that we can do to help you. We want you to be successful and enjoy the meeting as much as we do. And so just let us know.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Hey.
Thank you.